All right, it's time now for Focus. And today we have a report from the Parisian suburb of Saint-Denis. You may remember that that's where there was a major operation a few days after the November 2015 attacks. The raid lasted hours, with police firing thousands of rounds. Many residents were evacuated from their homes. And more than a year on from that traumatising night, some are saying the state hasn't helped them enough. Georges Zazbek and Jessica Sestili report.
The Paris suburb of Saint-Denis turned into a battle scene. Streets on lockdown as officers stormed the area. An operation launched against one of the country's most wanted men, Abdelhamid Abaoud, the suspected ringleader of the November 13th attacks. In the line of fire, his hiding spot, home to more than 80 people. An assault that lasted more than 4 hours, killing Abaoud and 2 others. Amid heavy gunfire and explosions, Nagorin and his family fled their home.
That's the apartment where we were living.
More than a year later, the horror remains just as vivid.
It hit its peak when we saw the explosion. The window shattered. We feared for our lives. We feared for our families' lives. It was a war zone.
Rushed to shelter in a nearby gymnasium, for Nagorin and his neighbours, it'd be the first of many sleepless nights. In shock. Not just from the event, but also with the uncertainty of his family's future.
Once we'd fled the place where we feared for our lives, we were faced with a new wave of stress. What's going to happen to us now? Where would we live?
They're qualified by the state as collateral victims of a police intervention and not of terrorism, meaning limited state aid towards housing, medical care or psychological treatment. With the majority of residents coming from a poorer social background, financial aid was crucial. Many found themselves without resources. After nearly 2 weeks in a gym hall, they were moved onto a small hotel. But Nagorin was lucky. Being French and having a steady job and income meant his family immediately qualified for social housing. That wasn't the case for Lucina.
Always the code. Sometimes you forget. Welcome to my place. Make yourself at home. This is where I live.
Like several other residents, the Burkina Faso national didn't have a French visa, so risked expulsion. Under social pressure from activists, the government has since regulated his situation. But he's still having a hard time dealing with French bureaucracy.
Once my status had been regulated, I thought I would get a job. But there are many steps afterwards, getting social security and then starting to write your CV, then job applications.
For the past few months, he's been enrolled in a training course provided by the state to help him find a job, a step towards eventually qualifying for social housing. But he's still struggling with authorities who, until recently, had been trying to move him from his small room to a homeless shelter where he knows no one.
You're put in a place where you're isolated, where you don't know anyone. You're a foreigner and the conditions are bad. It's a way to get rid of us. It's obvious. That's the problem.
Working class and without special victim status, residents had feared abandonment by the state. They felt it become a reality. It's concerns like these which moved them to join forces with housing rights collective Droit au Logement. With their support, they've held monthly protests and met with several ministers to force authorities to take responsibility for the state-led operation.
The authorities who were in charge of this operation have to take responsibility for its consequences. That means finding homes for the building's former residents.
Well over a year since the assault took place,
the results are half-hearted and mixed. Authorities have not followed through on all their commitments.
but according to the state, the slow process is due to the fact that several residents had been living undocumented in France. Fearing discovery by authorities, they'd refused to fill out compensation forms, meaning zero access to aid. Officials say that they want to improve resident situations, regardless of their legal status.
The aid we provide is tailor-made to every single case. We support every individual and we don't leave behind anyone. Essentially, that's what we've been doing, helping move residents from their former hardships and regular status to being in line with the law and in a regulated situation.
This February, they pledged to regulate all cases within the next 6 months, which would open the door to finding long-term accommodation. A promising message to all residents of 48 Rue de la République to finally turn the page on the trauma of the past.
Joining me now in the studio from FENVAC, a Victims of Terrorist Attacks organisation, is Paul Bertrand. Hello, thank you very much for coming in. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but from the report, it actually sounds like the French state actually is taking its responsibilities. It's just that there's a problem with certain people because they don't have official documentation.
No, the problem is that people can legally be considered by like a victim of terrorism because it's the police attack which lead these people to this situation and not a direct terror attack. So this is a very complexity in this affair, in this situation, and that's why they can't reach the Fonds de Garantie help. It's a French dispositif. The French
funds
fund
put aside for this kind of situation. I guess you're talking about the difference between them having been classified as the victims of a police operation rather than the victims of a terrorist attack. But had they been classified differently as the victims of a terrorist attack, do you think they would have got necessarily better compensation and all been treated equally? Because there is still that problem of some people not really wanting to put themselves forward because they're not officially allowed to work or live in France, it sounds like, from the report.
Yeah, that's why the law have to change, to adapt, because this kind of event arrived because of the terrorism, and so we have to adapt our legal framework.
So you think that the authorities haven't yet really caught up with the new reality of what France is going through? Like, there hasn't really been a precedent, and so they classified it as police operation.
No, we had the same problem with Mohamed Merah, the assault against Mohamed Merah in 2012, and this question is
intervention,
is still not fixed. It's a question of people who have been in this situation after this kind.
What do you think people should be entitled to, people who've lived through such traumatic events from the state? How much financially and what in terms of psychological support?
We think the state have to take charge of the psychological need and the property need, and these people should not be abandoned by the state, because this is a direct how to say that, consequence of the terror attack, and the state have
they have a responsibility.
In this situation.
All right, thank you very much for coming in, Paul Bertrand, from a Victims of Terrorist Attacks organisation here in France called FENVAC, and thank you for watching. I'll be back